Good morning. I am recovering from dental surgery. I'm really swollen. Not sure if I really want to be in front of the camera, but for this opinion piece, this episode 3 about the disappearance of William Tyrrell, perhaps I'll read some of it and then maybe just let you look at Kangaroo while I continue to do so. What I thought we should move on to next is just looking at some of the people that have been investigated as persons of interest and suspects. A person of interest, that's different to being a suspect, okay? And it can mean many things. It could mean that maybe because they've got information that is important or for any reason. It's not the same as being a suspect. I'll just point that out. Okay, so let's remember that within a couple of hours the dog squad had arrived. Well, it was one dog, his name was Gov, and he searched for 3 days, and he got covered in paralysis ticks, which are deadly, and it was really hard going because of the scrub around the home. It's very jungle-like. It's a little bit different to our bush or forest, where you might have some forests that are like red trees, you know, the big red timber trees and the pine trees and things, and it's not that jungle type of subtropical and tropical viney overgrown bush that we often have in Australia, and that is in the Kendall area. And there was pole air, so they were searching by air. There were volunteers and firefighters on the ground, family members, you know, and police and the search and rescue emergency people. So it was a huge search, and the area was gone over at a later date as well, really thoroughly, you know, to the point where police are secure in their knowledge that William's body isn't around the area. When we look at people that have been big players in it, you've got Gary Jubilan, who came in to take over the helm of the task force, which was the Operation Roseanne, and he's the guy that he lost his career over this because of illegal recordings he made. He's got a criminal conviction and he got fined. And we have Alana Smith. She's the child advocacy whistleblower who brought to light years later that William was actually in foster care at the time of his disappearance. We have, since 2016, a $1 million reward for information leading to the discovery of what happened to William. Now, when it comes to Alana Smith, she says, you know, William Tyrrell represents so very much. He represents values, he represents family, and, you know, her deepest wish would for him to be alive, to be able to grow up as a smart, confident, and educated child, to know his biological family. She gives a voice to those that are abused and who pass away in care, because it's not known by the general public actually how common, how often this happens. So as we talk about this, it's important that, you know, the naming and shaming of people of interest, this is not called for. It doesn't mean that there is an active suspicion or anything linking this person to the crime. It is different from someone being named a suspect. But anyway, some of these people were suspects. Now, Bill Spedding. This is the chap that went to the foster home, the foster grandmother's home 3 days earlier to look at the washing machine. He has got convictions for abuse from 1983, 1985. He lives in Bonny Hills, or lived in Bonny Hills. His home was raided, the septic tank was emptied, and he states that his life, this shattered his life. He was targeted by police and his life was destroyed. You know, and he particularly names Gary Jubilan, who said that, you know, Mr. Nice Washing Machine Man, we're going to ruin you. And he also is quoted as stating that Gary Jubilan said, when people talk about William Tyrrell, they're going to talk about you. Excuse my reading of this. I'm not feeling well. I'm a bit lightheaded. And anywho, let's press on. And Bill Snadden is actually suing the state of New South Wales for damages. On the morning of the day William was reported missing, the 12th of September 2014, the foster mother says she tried ringing him at 9:03 and got the answer service. So she's saying, well, he wasn't at his home. Bill Spedding also says that he tried calling the foster grandmother's home and got no answer. When he got no answer, he says that his wife was going out. I think she was going shopping, and he went with her and joined her for coffee. I'm not sure about witnesses stating they remember him in particular. I know the police followed this up. I know there is a receipt for a purchase there. I couldn't, I remember thinking, you know, this doesn't show, you know, who had what drink and that he was actually there. But I know the police followed it up, so perhaps they have a description of him being with his wife from a waitress. I'm not sure. But, you know, they still pursued him for a long time. Now, we come to a man called Ray Porter. And Ray Porter was living in a nursing home in a geriatric facility at Port Macquarie. Port Macquarie is the town, the larger centre that's north of Kendall. And he had a carer called Kirsten. She was an aged care worker that worked in the facility, and she says that he approached her in the corridor one morning, and he seemed upset, and he rested his head on her shoulder, and he told her his friend Frank. Now, Frank is never named by Ray. It's Frank Abbott. The name Abbott is never mentioned in the nursing home or by this person. But it's just that he has a friend, Frank. And Frank asked him one day that he states now is he's dead actually. So Ray Porter has since died. He says that he was asked to pick Frank and a young boy up from behind Kendall State School. So he picked him up from behind a shed on the property of the state school and drove them 300 kilometres north. And he's trying, the witness Kirsten is saying that he felt very bad about doing this, and he also told her that he didn't want any more visitors, etc. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think of her. She says she told a supervisor and possibly the police just at the time that she was told. So this was after the Williams disappearance. And indeed, they ended up going to Frank Abbott. And Frank Abbott isn't a very nice person. He had accommodation at in a caravan on a property owned, I think, by Paul Savage. His Presbyterian minister had said, look, has anyone got a place where this guy can live? He was having trouble finding somewhere to live because, you know, he's a shithead. And he was living in this caravan, and Frank Abbott has convictions for abuse. He had a murder conviction overturned on acquittal. That was something from the 1980s, and then he sort of states that he you know, skipped a murder charge from 1996. And he's serving 16 years. It was first a sexual assault charge, and it's been lowered to child abuse charge. He's doing time in prison now. And he was certainly pursued in this case. There's all sorts of horrible stories around Frank Abbott, namely that he was abusing someone's chocolate Labrador dog there. Sorry, my stitches are really hurting from talking. So I hope I sound okay. There's a chap called Tony Jones, and he's a convicted pedophile, and his estranged wife. I mean, sometimes I feel like, you know, people with grudges, it's very easy for them to say things, isn't it? You know, or they might have a true belief that you know, someone could have something to do with a crime. But there's Tony Jones, and he told his wife that he was going out scrapping. So this is scrap metal hunting, you know, to look for scrap metal in the forests, etc., with his son. But his son says, well, he wasn't with me. His son Dwayne denies it. On that day, the 12th of September 2014, Frank had gone out in the morning. His estranged wife is saying he didn't get home until later in the day, but he goes, I got home at lunchtime, I was drunk. She owned a Toyota Camry, a white one, similar to the one that later foster mother says she saw parked in Benaroon Drive. He states that he was never allowed to drive this car. People dispute that, but he says, look, I never drove that car. I wasn't allowed to drive the wife's car. Everyone's a liar. So, you know, he's come under question, but again, these people have been investigated so thoroughly by Operation Roseanne, and they're not arrested, and they've had a lot of pressure put on them. They've gone to court. They've spoken at the inquest, which is just an inquiry. It doesn't mean that at the end of it, right, someone's being decided on their guilt or innocence. You know, they've been hounded by the public, by news journalists and things like that. I think Paul Savage is the neighbour across the street, and he is actually connected just as an acquaintance through, I think, sorry, I'm a bit vague at the moment. I've even just tried writing things out because I'm vaguer than normal, but I haven't done a very good job of it through the codeine. But Paul Savage is the neighbour, and he helped in the search, and he helped because the neighbour Anne-Marie came and knocked on his door and said, have you seen a little boy? Anne-Marie is the neighbour that in one of the foster mother's stories, she had gone first in the car to the riding school, although the riding school has changed locations. And at the time, it was in the opposite direction to what she drove in. But anywho, she went. I think there might be a back road that joins it, maybe. So anyway, she goes left out of her driveway in the car, and she goes to the riding school and looks, and then she walks there. And then a third time she leaves the property to go down into the street. She sees Anne-Marie, and it's Anne-Marie that knocks on the door of Paul Savage. But Paul Savage made a statement to police that morning he heard nobody. He did not hear the foster mother or father calling out for William. And it's quite funny, in one of his interviews with a news station, like with 60 Minutes or something, he's being interviewed and he's doing a walkthrough. He's asked, so how loudly did you call for William? And he goes, William, William. You know, it's very bizarre, and it's as if, is he aware that Paul Savage has said, oh, I haven't heard anyone calling? I don't know. Make of it what you will. So Paul Savage goes up to see the foster grandmother immediately, and helps in the search. You know, it's stated that, you know, by the parents, oh, did the foster father come back at 10:35? But this is why the foster mother keeps piping up. Remember, I told you that in one of the interviews, the police media interview, that when he says 10:15 about the time of William's disappearance, she goes, no, but she said this herself several times. But if he's come back, the foster father, at 10:35, if her story doesn't add up either way, with either it was 5 minutes after he texted, then arrived, and then they looked for 5 minutes, and then they made the call at 10:56 to OOO, and it doesn't add up with the time that she says she spent looking before he even came back. So was she sitting on the deck? Was she out in the paddock when he found her? There's so many stories, and you know, if he left at 10, which is looking more likely, as because of the other things that he did, and when he, sorry, I'm not making sense very much. I'll try and do this better later, but you know, I'm just trying to say the timelines change so much every time new evidence is pointed out to them. They change the time of when he left, when she started looking, when she last heard things. What's indisputable, so what we can't dispute, is the time that she rang OOO, which was 10:56. What I want to mention is, you know how I said there's a gentleman that later states that he saw a young boy in a car. There were two cars driving erratically. There was a boy in a Spider-Man suit. At one point he mentions he saw the cape, you know, which is Superman. At another point, we know that he calls him Daniel. Now, Daniel is Daniel Morcombe. He's a young boy. He was, I think, just 13 or 12 when he went missing from Sunshine Coast. It was Christmas time. He was waiting at a bus stop, and he was on his way to go Christmas shopping. Daniel Morcombe has a twin and an older brother, and the parents together, you know, all of the family have these startling blue eyes. Daniel was known for his blue eyes. Both his parents have the most brilliant blue eyes, like the Mediterranean Sea, just light, bright, sparkling, and the whole family have these eyes. And anyway, Daniel was waiting at the bus to go to a shopping centre, I think to Maroochydore. He's waiting at a bus stop under an underpass, a highway. All the roads up there, there's lots of little freeways linked by traffic islands and things, and it's a very strange road system. And he was waiting there under an overpass of the freeway for a bus. One of the buses had broken down that day, and a bus that was following through didn't stop to pick him up because he knew the next bus was coming 3 minutes later. And he Sorry, I'm dizzy. He was already out of time, running out late. So he saw Daniel and didn't stop because he knew there was a bus coming just afterward. And by the time that second bus went, Daniel wasn't there. And it eventuates someone had offered him a lift. Now, in this case, the father and mother of Daniel Morcombe searched every day, and they did their own investigation, which is that they followed up leads and things that were given to them. And they also went around, there's a circle of pedophiles, in this case, in the case of William Tyrrell, there's known sex offenders in the area and people that all sort of know each other, people with, questionable lives and pasts and things. And same in the Daniel Morcombe case, and there's sort of, these collections of people, this community, if you will, that sort of all know of each other and hang out, and, birds of a feather. And what Mr. Morcombe thought is maybe if he talks to them, they'll be more open and upfront and he'll get more out of them. And, when they're giving rumours or giving information about, what we know about William, we know something and know of who might have done something, he would go and talk to them himself, Mr. Morcombe, thinking that they might be more open. But, it eventuates. It's just they're all just assholes, just wanting to insert themselves in the story, and it gives them an opportunity to talk about things that they like, things that they don't get to talk to people about. It's sick, right? And I think this is what Ray Porter has done, if it is true what he's told Kirsten, the aged care worker, because it's a proven phenomenon about people who insert themselves in cases. And I think this is the case. Because the people that Mr. Morcombe ended up talking to, they didn't know anything, because eventually, years later, Daniel's body was found. His bones were found, I think it was within 40 kilometres of where he went missing. They'd been buried at some sort of maybe a strawberry farm or something like that, that the person who took him maybe sort of had some sort of connection with through work or something. So bones were found, and then eventually they were identified as William, and all of the stories that these motherfuckers had told Mr. Morphew, they were just getting their jollies by talking about a missing boy, talking about sex abuse, etc. So I think that this is the case when it comes to the story about Ray saying that the child, William Tyrrell, was driven in a car 300 kilometres north, and that he's buried that far away, and specifically by, a sex offender called Frank. And, all of these false reportings and everything, all they do is slow down the investigation. They have to be followed up on. They distress people. And it's false leads. It's giving people ideas that aren't true about the case, because, who are the last people to see William Tyrrell, the foster family? There's questions about the last photo. Metadata is shown to be incorrect. And William can't be placed at the home. The foster grandmother has dementia, so we're shaky on the photo on another person other than the the foster parents giving evidence that he was there. There's no sniffer dog outside of the home that found his scent, and the neighbours did not see the children playing. They didn't see William. They didn't hear William. They didn't see the cars that the foster mother later said that she saw. And they didn't hear anybody calling out for William. And yet thousands of man hours of volunteers, of police, of emergency services, of private investigators, etc., are all following up the stories that are being told. Now, yes, we know the foster parents, they are not named as suspects, but there's no way in my mind that they are cleared. They are not cleared. They physically can't be cleared. Okay? I don't know what's going to happen with this inquest. I know that they are absolutely devastated that Gary Jubilan, who now has a shady record because, he has, to have done what he's done, he had to have known that he was endangering the validity of any trial if it went to court, and the person that he was taping conversations because he was pursuing Paul Savage because he's got ties to someone else that has shady character. Was it Tony Jones? And they Paul Savage says, look, I'm an acquaintance. I'm not a friend. I'm not a crony. So what if we talked in a pub? That doesn't make us friends. And people come on and say, you don't talk to acquaintances for an hour. Oh, sorry, yes, you do. I talk to acquaintances for long periods of time. It doesn't make you friends. There's people that really drive home. There's people that, they talk about this case. They might have legal degrees, and the child advocates, and they're really connected to the idea of a pedophile ring, of this being planned, or of, this being some sort of, military operation that a pedophile ring is carried out. And to, back up their case, they say things like, oh, it's so shady because he was in a pub talking to this guy, and you don't talk to acquaintances. You might say hi to an acquaintance. It's just this narrative, and it's this, emotional, projection that they're putting into the case, okay? And this doesn't solve crimes. And so they'll say, it's valid, Gary Jubilan pursuing Paul Savage because he was the one that was there on site, so he would have known when, William Tyrrell arrived and could have stolen him away. Well, he's there looking. He's giving evidence. He was there on site looking. But his interviews have been recorded with Gary Jubilan saying, well, he didn't want to be accused later of, maybe roughing him up or of, saying anything that was like putting words into his mouth or whatever it was. He says he did it for self-protection. But, he was he's jeopardizing the case, isn't he, when you do things that aren't lawful. So it would have fallen over in court anyway, maybe. But, so the foster parents are very disappointed that the judge has said, no, Gary Jubilan, he's no longer connected to the case. He's not in his job. So we've got enough statements, so we can, we can just use his statements, written statements, etc., and everything that we've got, rather than have him come on and talk, So the foster parents aren't happy about this because he's a big advocate for them, But, I want to know, was the Mile Lakes district searched? It would be a very difficult search because I've scratched my nose. I couldn't feel my face and I've scratched my nose. I hope this inquest, the inquiry, when we get the information, that we will get something like a discovery. We will know what the police did to follow up with regards to the conference call. Not just that the foster father made a call. So what? He's just placing himself away from the scene at the time. So what? We want to know, I want to know, when was that organised? When was that organised prior to making that call? Was it a week prior? I want to know, what searches were made at the home in Sydney of the foster parents, what searches were made along the route, and how they explain not interviewing the foster father until 6 days later, how they explain his stories that change all the time, how the foster mothers change all the time. How are they comfortable with that? How are they comfortable with it? And I want to know what their forensic investigators have made of this photograph. Anyway, look, I can't talk any further. This makes no sense. I'm very dizzy. But I just wanted to talk a few of the suspects because, there have been many people investigated in this case. There's 56 witnesses called into the investigation, into this inquiry to give evidence. Some of them are the people that I've mentioned now. And, so the aged care worker and people with shady past, people make a lot of 20, I've said this before, but, there are sex offenders in every area, okay? And there are people that want to insert themselves into cases in every case, whether just maliciously or for their own jollies or because they like the opportunity to talk about certain subjects, openly. There's lots of reason why people ring tip lines and, I don't give any credibility to the guy that says he saw this young boy in a car because he sat around waiting to be interviewed and his excuses, I thought people were coming out to me. Nah, I think if he had a sighting and he'd be ringing police when he heard of the investigation. The tip line was made very well known. Crime Stoppers number, the 1300 Crime Stoppers number was advertised in his area straight away and often, and he's got no excuse. It's complete bullshit, especially since in one story he saw a cape and in another story he calls the child Daniel. Okay, he's just, there are many people that insert themselves into cases. Maybe he's a lonely old man. Maybe he wants the excitement of being involved. Maybe he's genuinely mistaken, but the story about the racing cars, it gets more extravagant as he goes. It's a coincidence that one of the cars looks like the made-up car, one of the made-up cars that was in Benaroon Street, according to foster mother. She told the 000 operator that there were no such cars in the street, that she hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary, no cars. She states it herself. Frankly, it's just my opinion, but, she's full of shit, and so is the foster father, and they've had the fostered child, the daughter, with them all this time, and okay, she might be safe. I mean, she's still alive, but she's been under their hypnotized spell all this time. See you later.